Hi everyone. So today we are talking about cable systems and cable networks. So a couple of actually a lot of important terms. We have multiple system operator. So multiple system operator is a cable system that owns two or more cable systems. So multiple system operator is an organization that owns two or more cable systems. So you have to understand that a cable system is within a local market. Let's say it's the city of Fullerton, and let's say Charter owns that particular system in Fullerton. And let's say they also own the cable system over in Yorba Linda or over in Placentia. So that means they have three cable systems that they operate. And so under that definition, right, Charter would be an example of a multiple system operator. They own two or more cable systems. Pricing tier. So a pricing tier or tiers is a pricing strategy based off of customers' wealth that best meets the needs of the customer. So again, it's a pricing strategy based on customers' wealth that best meets the needs of the customers. You have to think about, well, the cable system has to think about the local market that they're in. So they have to take into consideration, right, what's the average income of people who live in that particular city and provide appropriate pricing based off of how much money the individuals in that city earn. Bundles. So it's essentially what customers do, right? Buying several cable or television networks for one price, or I should say, buying several cable and television network programming for one price. So again, it's buying several cable and television network programming for one price. Number four, pay-per-view. So it's paying for a special event. So whether that special event is a boxing match or maybe a concert. So again, it's paying for a special event. Must carry. So a cable system must carry a television network that is approved by the FCC. But that television network cannot charge the cable system a retransmission consent fee, and must carry lasts for 3 years. So that's kind of a long definition, so I'll repeat that. So a cable system must carry a television network that's approved by the FCC, but that television network cannot charge the cable system a retransmission consent fee. And again, must carry lasts for 3 years. So you have to understand that, right? So when a television network, let's say, wants to be carried on a cable system, and for whatever reason the cable system refuses to carry that station, the television network can apply through the FCC for a must carry. And if the FCC approves, the cable system must carry that particular television network. It lasts for 3 years. The bad part about this is that the television network cannot charge the cable system a retransmission consent fee. So anytime a network television station or a cable network runs their programming through the coaxial cables, which is the wires, or through the satellite waves, the satellite system or the cable system operator has to pay the television network or the cable network for carriage. And we'll talk about that when we get into number 6. So retransmission consent is a fee that the cable system pays to a TV or cable network in order to run its programming through its services. So again, it's a fee that a cable system pays to a TV or a cable network in order to run its programming through its services. So I don't know how many of you have, traditional cable, but anytime you run programming through its wires, right? The cable system just can't run programming through its wires, and it needs to get permission from the various cable networks and television networks. And part of that consent is a fee they have to pay to the cable network or to the television network. Hopefully that was clear. So PEG stands for public access, educational is the E, and G is government. And so again, it's P is public access, E is education, and G is government. And basically a cable system operator has to carry PEG on its cable system. So again, right, a cable system operator must carry PEG on its cable system. So for instance, right, I live in Long Beach, so I get the, for public access, you know, anybody who is a subscriber to Spectrum is supposed to have access to the studio so they can do their own programming. Education, we're supposed to receive, for instance, information about Cal State Long Beach or what's going on with Long Beach schools. In terms of government, well, we're supposed to be able to get what's going on with the city council meetings through TV. So again, PEG stands for Public Access, Education, and Government, and it must be provided by the cable system for free. It has to be carried, right? It has to be carried. So that's PEG. So coaxial cable. Coaxial cable is the wire that carries the programming. So it's the wire that carries the programming. Coaxial cable nowadays is kind of sort of becoming obsolete as more of us go over to, let's say, satellite, or more of us start streaming content, right? The idea of needing a coaxial cable is especially if you're younger, seems to be going away. So again, coaxial cable is the wire that carries the programming. Cable and satellite networks. So those are kind of intertwined nowadays. It's a network that only exists on a cable or satellite system. So it's a network that only exists on a cable or satellite system. So in other words, you can't get HBO or ESPN with just rabbit ears, right? Just the old-fashioned way of getting TV. You can't access it. Multiplexing. So some cable networks multiplex. So for instance, ESPN has created, you know, ESPN2 or ESPN en Español. And so the idea of multiplexing is to create a new network. So you're creating a new network when you multiplex. Creating a new network to generate more, obviously more revenue, number one. So again, you create a new network to generate more revenue, number one. Number two, you're trying to target an entirely different audience. So number two, target a different audience. Number three, is you're trying to increase your subscriber fees or your retransmission consent fees. So subscriber fees obviously means that for, let's say you're an HBO subscriber, you can charge more now in subscriber fees, right, to customers if you want the entire HBO family. And also you can charge the cable system more money through retransmission consent fees, more money, because now instead of just carrying, let's say, ESPN, now they're carrying ESPN2, ESPNU, ESPN en Español, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a way, again, of generating more revenue for the actual cable network. So I'll repeat this one more time. So it's the multiplexing is creating a new network. Number one, to generate more revenue, again, through charging the cable systems more money. It's to target a different audience, number two. And number three, it's to increase your subscriber fees. So for instance, HBO can charge its subscribers more money if they want the HBO family on there. So Superstation. Superstation has permission from the FCC to use the satellite. So again, Superstation has permission from the FCC to use the satellite. So I know it sounds a little bit bizarre to you, but you know, television networks didn't always have permission to use our satellites. And so Ted Turner was really the first one to get permission to use a satellite to transmit a signal. So premium cable network is when a customer pays an additional fee to access these cable networks. So again, it's when a customer pays an additional fee to access these cable networks. So if you think about, Cinemax or Showtime or HBO, in order to access those cable networks, you pay an additional fee. Hunting license, it's an agreement between, this is important, it's an agreement between a cable network and a cable system. So it's an agreement between a cable network and a cable system, where a cable network can approach and try to secure carriage on individual franchises on individual franchises. So again, it's an agreement between a cable network and a cable system where a cable network can approach and try to secure carriage on individual franchises. So going back to my example about multiple system operator. So oftentimes these cable systems have individual franchises all over the country, right? And so let's just say that I wanted to get the Puente channel on Spectrum. And so I created this network and I talked to the Spectrum folks, and the Spectrum folks say, oh, sure. He's like, we can grant you a hunting license so you can go out and try to secure carriage on our franchises. And so, I would drive around and meet with the folks that handled programming for each and every one of the franchises to see if I can get carriage onto their individual franchises. So that's the hard way to go about it. Oftentimes the cable system just grants you a license so you can just be on the system. But every once in a while, if they don't have a lot of faith in your network, for instance, like the Puente network, why would they have faith in that? They would grant you a hunting license. Go, okay, well, go out there and see how many franchises you can convince to carry you on their local lineup. So hopefully that makes sense. So in terms of who created or who developed the first cable system, the first cable system was created in the state of Pennsylvania by a guy by the name of James Watson, way back in the 1940s. So 1948 to be exact. So James Watson created the first cable system. Now, if you've ever been to Pennsylvania, right? So it's very mountainous, and so he created a cable system to sort of like improve television coverage in the late 40s in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, the cable system is not necessarily what you think of when you think about modern day cable. They use, I want to say he used like microwave sort of satellite dishes to transmit signal from point A to point B. But anyways, that was considered to be the first cable system, again, developed by James Watson. The first underground cable system that we're kind of used to, more modern day system, was created by James Dolan, or Charles Dolan, I should say. Charles Dolan was part of the Dolan family that owns the New York Knicks. But anyways, Charles Dolan started that. The name of the company was called Sterling Manhattan. Sterling Manhattan is considered to be the first underground cable system. It was located obviously in the borough of Manhattan, and it just basically wired most of the buildings in the Manhattan area. Part of it was to help tourists. Tourists can be entertained, and so the early Sterling Manhattan system had some sort of agreement to just air sports content, and I want to say movies. But anyways, first underground cable system was created by Sterling Manhattan in New York City. So Ted Turner is important because he's the guy who created the idea of the superstation. And he really is the one that launched the first cable television network. And it was called WTCG. It was a superstation. And really what the superstation was is, again, he got permission to use the satellites, and he was able to use that to transmit signal across the country. And so again, Ted Turner is credited with starting the superstation. ESPN is important because ESPN is the first 24-hour basic cable network. The first 24-hour basic cable television network. So basic cable, different than premium. Basic cable, right, you buy it in a bundle. Premium cable usually means that you're paying an additional fee in order to buy that programming. So first basic cable, ESPN, first basic cable television network, ESPN, that ran for 24 hours. First 24-hour basic cable television network, ESPN. The Real World, 1992. The Real World really changed the way programming was done on cable because of the success of The Real World. You had way more reality TV programming on cable because of the success of The Real World. I mean, it was created by Bunham and Murray were the producers, the showrunners of that particular show, and that started the trend towards reality TV. And I'll show you a clip of Murray. Hopefully, it works. The budgets for cable TV tend to be lower, although HBO spends a lot of money on some of its pilots. It spent $25 million, for instance, in the pilot for Westworld. I want to say it spent close to $20 million, or between $15 and $20 million for the pilot on a Boardwalk Empire. So budgets tend to be lower on cable, but again, not always. HBO does spend a lot of money. All right, so let's talk a little bit about The Real World. So The Real World is really important because it really launched the modern era of reality television on not only on cable television, but also on network television. So here we have an idea, right? This idea that we're now centering a story around regular folks. And it's supposedly, right? It's supposed to be unscripted. So that's sort of like the modern version of the reality TV shows, is that it doesn't center on actors, and it's supposed to be non-scripted. Of course, we know that it's kind of staged, but nevertheless, this was an interesting idea. The idea of The Real World itself comes from a television show, well, a PBS show called American Family, centered around a family that lived in Santa Barbara that was going through a divorce. And so that's where the idea more or less comes from. And then Bunham and Murray basically come up with this idea to develop a reality TV show that centers around these young folks living in one particular house. And, all sorts of drama goes on when you have, 7 strangers living in, sharing the same space, whether it's, romance or conflict or whatever. And so really this captures the imagination of people throughout the country, right? It makes MTV rather popular. The Real World is the longest running series in the history of MTV. Again, it's the longest running series in the history of MTV. The Real World is sort of launched this modern era of reality television, this sort of era where you have stories that center around, non-actors, and it's supposed to be a non-scripted story. And this, again, it sets the stage or a springboard for future reality television shows that sort of follow the same sort of, format or idea.
What ended up happening was Mary Ellis, Mark constructed a deal where we would consult for MTV, and primarily it was Mary Ellis doing the consulting because she had the soap opera scripted background. And the idea was to do a soap opera, essentially a half-hour daily show, potentially, or a half-hour once-a-week show about young people starting out their lives in New York. And I think there was a writer named Michael Dugan, and a script. Mary Ellis worked with him, and they developed a script called St. Mark's Place, and it focused on a group of young people living down on St. Mark's Place, down in the village, in the East Village, and sort of starting out their lives. And it was a great script. Everybody was really happy with it, and we did the budgets for what it would cost to make this show. And suddenly there was this feeling of, oh my God, we can't spend this kind of money. We have a channel where basically we air music videos for free. And, we're going to spend that much. And this was low budget. I mean, I think our budget was pretty reasonable. It probably wasn't more than, a couple $100,000 a half hour. But it was still big numbers. And there were conversations. We even reached out to Haim Saban, who we had gotten to know, and he offered to handle the foreign on it and to put up the money. But MTV didn't really want to partner with someone on it. If they were going to do it, they were going to do it on its own. And so it all fell apart. And so it was yet another, so close but not quite there for us. And so Mary Alice and I started talking about, well, maybe there's another way of doing this. There's another way of telling this story. And, we were doing American Families at that time, which was, could definitely be used as an example of what we could do. So we went into New York and met Lauren Correo, who was the development executive under Doug Herzog. And we pitched her the idea of The Real World. And we basically said, rather than make a scripted show about young people starting out their lives, we want to make an unscripted show. We want to go out and cast, at that time, we talked about 6 young people who are all very different from each other, who come from different backgrounds, different races, different socioeconomic, different whatever. And we want to put them together in a loft and sort of follow them as they sort of take that big step in the life when, they're in the real world and they're on their own. They're going to be responsible for what they do. We're not going to step in, and we will chronicle what happens to them. We will chronicle their relationships with each other. We'll chronicle their efforts to start up their careers. And we said we think there'll be great drama of these 6 people living together, and that they'll make a lot of mistakes with each other. They'll have arguments, but out of those arguments will come growth. And Lauren looked at us and said, well, that's what I lived when I first moved to New York, and I totally get it.